A lot of the times, conventional wisdom gets things wrong, but they become so ubiquitous and accepted widely that nobody really questions them. And if you do question them or contradict them, then people look at you as if there's something morally wrong with you, right? Like, why would you say that? Don't you want this to be a good thing? And so on. So I'll give you an example today. And as soon as I start talking about it, I think you'll realize just how controversial it can be, or how quickly you can be labeled as like a, I don't know what to call it, not necessarily a villain, but like either someone who doesn't know what they're talking about, someone who has nefarious intentions, someone who's like a conspiracy theorist, or someone who's crazy or insane in some way, or is joking, right? Like, because these are all the ways to try to eliminate validity from someone's opinion, but they're all basically philosophical fallacies, right? They're like ad hominem attacks. Rather than looking at the facts and the idea itself, you attack the person because you don't want to consider that it might be true. So the example I'm talking about today is how, in many cases, recycling is actually bad for the environment. So there's actually a decent article on this from the New York Times from 2011, but basically it talks about this idea that mandated recycling is the real problem, right? So New York City spends millions and millions of dollars on its recycling program that could be better spent, actually doing things that help the environment. So initiatives such as paper recycling or cardboard recycling are actually really bad for the environment. They create byproducts that leach into the soil, that are hard to dispose of, that you can't really purify. And so it's just waste that goes into the environment, causing issues. Um, and the most efficient kinds of recycling, like aluminum, are already being done by companies because they're profitable. So the problem that comes in with recycling is when you start to mandate it even when it isn't profitable. But the thing is, something being profitable is actually a sign that it's a net positive to the economy and generally the environment if it's priced correctly. And in recycling's case, it is definitely priced correctly because the amount of labor, effort, and waste product created from recycling things like paper is really bad for the environment, really bad for the economy. And yet, so many cities and counties continue to do it and mandate it and force it on people because recycling has become an end unto its own. It's no longer about helping the environment, it's about feeling morally superior because we believe recycling is inherently good, even if it costs us more than it gives us back. Now, the other issue is that when something like recycling takes on a life of its own, if you ever try to bring up the facts and the numbers and offer alternatives, the response you're met with is, what's wrong with you? Of course, recycling is good. The second problem with recycling, especially on a massive scale, is the economic impact on people's time. So if you think about it, the amount of time people spend sorting their recycling from the garbage every week is not a lot, but it adds up across billions of people worldwide. And most of that trash usually ends up in the landfill anyway, or gets mixed again and resorted later down the line in machines and factories. So the sorting at home is really not necessary. It adds an unnecessary economic strain on people's time for very little benefit, or in some cases, even harm, straight up. So, really, it doesn't make sense for a lot of recycling. And the recycling that does make sense is already being done by companies voluntarily simply because it saves them money. So, we need to figure out a way to align the incentives around recycling and other environmental impacts so that the things that make economic and environmental sense get done, and the things that don't get pushed regardless of how morally superior they may seem, such as recycling paper, cardboard, etc. The last thing I'd want you to consider is this is true of all sorts of opinions, right? So if you try to take the stance that animals don't feel pain, they're not actually sentient, not in the same way human beings are, you'll immediately get a lot of pushback, right? There are philosophers like Peter Singer who will go to the ends of the earth to claim that regular people are evil and that animal cruelty is normal and rife and that animals can suffer the same way human beings can. Now, there are all sorts of these kinds of opinions, but what's important is to figure out where are the facts and then what's important for you to live your life the way you want, right? So if, for example, you figure out that a lot of recycling doesn't make sense, then you can take steps to introduce the most valuable recycling into your life, like aluminum, glass, whatever it might be, and to eliminate a lot of the less valuable recycling, whether it's paper, cardboard, other things. right? And in a similar way, a lot of renewable energy relies on lithium mining, which is really bad on the environment. And a lot of solar panels do not last long enough to justify the environmental expense of creating them. And in a similar vein, um, so this is kind of an example of where the cure ends up being significantly more problematic than the disease itself, right? So once you do your own research and you figure out, okay, these are the ways I want to live my life, then you can begin to prioritize that, and you can learn to live your life in a way where it doesn't matter what other people say. It doesn't matter how they judge you because you know the facts are on your side. And you can always present them with the reasoning and the arguments, and they can decide what they want to do from there, right? I've talked to multiple people about recycling, and a few of them responded negatively, but actually a lot of people did respond positively to the facts. So the second stage is once you've oriented your life around the things you value and the truths you have discovered or put together for yourself, you can also start to mention it to people who you think might be interested. And you'd be surprised at how many people respond positively. And for the ones who don't, that's okay. Let them continue doing whatever they want to do, right? And for the people who try to pressure you to change, ask them to give you their reasoning. If all they can tell you is recycling is inherently good, even when it's really expensive and bad for the environment, you can ignore them, right? If they have no facts to back up their arguments, then there's no point.